give price the importance it deserves. I have seen companies not paying attention too much to the area, and I have seen companies that really believe that pricing can be a game changer.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the quantifiable relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and today our guest is Frederico Zornig. Here are 3 things you want to know about Frederico before we start. He is the CEO of Quantiz Pricing Solutions, a pricing consultancy. He earned a PhD in pricing from the International School of Management, and he was a professor for 11 years. He stuck it out. Welcome, Robert.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure to be here with you.
Hey, how did you get into pricing?
A good question. Actually, let's make a large story short. I pursued my MBA at the University of Illinois. At that time, the late 90s, Kent Monroe was a pricing professor there. I really fell in love with the subject, so I decided to work with pricing since then, pretty much. So I joined J&J in the United States. I did some pricing work with them. Then I moved back to Brazil to implement a pricing project down here to structure all the pricing department for J&J Brazil. I became a director for J&J, sales and marketing director here. But then I left the company to start my own consulting firm. And that was 15 years ago. So.
Wow, great. You know, it's funny because I've never met Kent Monroe. I've seen him speak once, and I would really like to meet him one day. So maybe you can give me an introduction someday.
I mean, I think until today, he was my mentor, and he was the greatest professor I ever had. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, nice. Why do you stay in pricing? Why do you think pricing attracts you or keeps you?
Well, my background is engineering, but I never wanted to work in manufacturing or things like that. So I went to the business world, started as a sales rep, and then I moved as a sales manager before my MBA. And then I went to work with marketing, and marketing was completely subjective. Do you like or you didn't like this movie or this ad? And I had a hard time with that, being an engineer. For deciding on what do I like, or I couldn't find quantitative stuff. And then when I was at my marketing MBA at the University of Illinois, and I end up knowing about pricing, then I got a click. I said, wow, here I can use some mathematics, statistics, processes, and that will work for me. And then I selected to work with pricing. I found that would fit completely. I think it's the midterm between pure mathematics, but it's not just qualitative stuff and subjective stuff like a pure marketing professional would be in terms of advertising and things like that.
Yeah, I think pricing is funny in that way, in that I'm an engineer too, and it attracts us because it's a number. But then once you get into it, you realize it's still really wishy-washy, right? If you try to pick somebody's willingness to pay, they don't even know it themselves. So how could we figure out what it is? So there's still all this art and black magic going on around pricing. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. It's a mix. But you cannot rely just on the subjective. There are areas where you can put some numbers and make some good stuff in terms of analysis and things like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You had mentioned that you went to J&J as a pricing person, and then you went to lead sales and marketing. Now, I actually think that's really fascinating, because explain why it makes sense for a pricing person to lead sales and marketing?
Well, I think you have a better understanding in terms of profitability, in terms of which products you could raise prices, which products are really sensitive, where you cannot really make much effort in terms of trying to make more money out of one unit. You can make more money out of volume. And actually in Brazil was very peculiar because I did the project, the pricing project, the pricing area, the commercial policies, the new pricing lists, and then J&J allowed me to be the sales and marketing director. So I had to be the guardian of the project. I have done it. I couldn't get there and say, hey guys, forget about it. This is not something that's going to happen. No, more than ever, I have to defend what I have done and say, no, this is going to work. This is going to be good for the company. And it was very good to the company. So I stayed like 4 years as the commercial director for J&J. And I mean, I cannot say many details, even though it was 15 years ago, but we multiplied results in terms of contribution margin, in terms of percentages. And I remember I even received a call from the global CFO saying, Fred, that's fantastic. That's what we are really looking after in terms of getting results. And those were the things that were giving me the confidence to start my own consulting firm. I was thinking, I can reproduce that for other companies, what I have done here. Of course, I don't have all the time that I had at J&J. At J&J, I had 1 year to develop the project, and then I stayed 4 years as their commercial director here. Usually as a consultant, I don't have all this time. They are going to expect something much shorter. Yeah. But even though I have some clients that enter into that journey and they believe that this is more long-term achievement, it's not something that you're going to really change completely the game in like 1 year. But as you go step by step, you can keep improving what you have done before. And I think pricing is a journey. I think Paul Hunt says that very well in their pricing maturity studies that he presents. And I believe in that. The company has to go into that journey if they want to be really pricing experts or go after pricing excellence. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years.
Yep, it certainly doesn't happen overnight. Now, what I love about the story that you just shared is I've heard salespeople call pricing people the sales prevention team, meaning we're trying to get higher prices and we're keeping salespeople from closing deals. And what you just showed was, okay, I set the price list or the price policies, and now I'm going to go show you that it actually works. And so that was nice. It wasn't sales prevention team. And so now what I'd like to do is let's talk about price implementation. So you created these policies, and now we have to get the company to implement these new policies or commerce. And now, if you're the CEO, that's easy. You just tell everybody, go do this. Well, even then it's not easy. But but how do we go about price implementation? How do we go about getting people to adopt our new strategies?
Well, first of all, you have to have a very clear strategy where you want to go or to grow. Let's put it this way. I have to understand which products I have, which ones are more differentiated, where I can capture more value. There are products that you cannot really capture value. You have to go into the volume strategy and economies of scales and things like that. Even a company like J&J, we have both worlds. Then we have to think about those commercial policies, and they have to be somewhat win-win. So the customer have to understand that if they behave in the way we have the incentives created, they could benefit of that commercial policy. And that's a big, it's a detail, but that's important. Let's put it this way. I have a commercial policies that I can negotiate with my customer about 20% discount. And they assume that they are right to get those 20%. Now, what if I come to you and say, hey, do you know what? Now you can even make 25% discount with me. But then there's the but. I need you more volume. I need you more strategic products. I need you to comply with my consumer products policy. I need you to make a plan in terms of logistics or to receive a full freight of products or pallet. So you can create conditions where my company is going to win. And of course, you have to make analysis and to understand the ROI, the return on investment in terms of those incentives that we're going to give away, how much is going to come back to you, definitely. And then you can offer to your customer base a better deal. And then the sales force, if they understand that and they can communicate well with the customers, it's a win-win proposition. And that's what I have experienced for the last 20 years of my career. You can create options, thinking strategically on which behavior you want from your customer, create the right incentives. Let me tell you a story. I was working with a beer company in Brazil, and talking to the CEO, they said, oh, I have to get out of this price war on the major products. I have to put more product mix in the marketplace. But they were giving discounts to the trade, to the retailers of the world in terms of beer volume. He was paying their sales team based on beer volume. I said, unless you move out of this and you start to give incentives to the trade to buy your portfolio, you're never going to end up just selling beer. So it seems basic stuff, but many companies overseas this, and they just focus on the big number. Oh, beer is 80% of the business, but we have a price war everywhere. Everybody fighting for it at every 1% market share. And there's a lot of other products here: water, soft drinks, juices, energy drinks, a lot of other products that is not as hard as this one, and you can make lots of money. So let's create the right incentives.
I heard two really big lessons in the stories that you just told me. So the first big lesson I heard was negotiations are all about gives and gets. And so
Yeah.
we want to make sure we understand what we want from a customer, because they want from us a better price, if at all possible. They might want other things, but they certainly want a better price. And so
Yeah.
what can we get if we're going to give them a better price? And that truly
And
matters, some ROI analysis.
yeah, and you have to say to your sales team, oh, can I get a better price? The answer is always yes. But the customer have to give me something back, always. And if you create really strategic commercial policies, you can really change the way the market is built. In this same beer project, I remember that we created an incentive because they were buying pretty much 80% of the volume in the last week of the month. Here in Brazil, we have a little bit of inflation that leads to that type of behavior sometimes. And we create an incentive to guarantee the same price all over the month. So we could spread out the logistics. That would give the company, the beer company, a lot of savings in terms of extra hours, truck availabilities, and things like that. And at the beginning, the sales force was saying, no, that's a market behavior. It's always in the last week. It's not ever going to work. I said, guys, it's a lot of money we are offering. And probably it's going to make sense to the retailers, to the distributors that we're going to face along the month. Buy every week the same amount of products out of the shelf. And okay, let's try. Because we're giving price for them to doing that. Because we are saving a lot of money. I mean, fantastic. They accepted in the first month of the project. We did a pilot, and then suddenly all the Brazilian business was asking, "Hey, I want the new commercial policy. I want the new commercial policy." They're asking for it.
So I think the way I usually look at this, and tell me if you do it differently, please, is I usually ask companies to go through what are your costs to serve a customer. And if you can outline what all those costs are, then we could say, how could we lower some of those costs if we get our customer to do something different? And now we know what our gives and gets could be, right? I can now say this costs us a lot. So if I could change this behavior, if I could reduce this cost, I could share that with my customer in terms of a lower price.
I agree.
Yeah.
You share part of it. You keep some, you give some.
Yeah.
And it's a fair deal.
It's a win-win.
It is.
It's absolutely a win-win for both. Okay, so the other lesson I heard you teach us a second ago, or observation that I really want to point out, is I think I heard you say way too many companies focus only on revenue and not on profitability. And I got to
And
say,
that's also true, right?
it
That's
is.
also true.
I have a client that I've been working with right now who says we measure ourselves based on revenue growth and margin percentage. And although those are okay, I would much rather be measuring margin dollars, right?
I agree. I agree. No, I have a good story about that. I was negotiating a large project with a Spanish company that does business here in Brazil. And the Latin America president of the company told me, Fred, we won the project and you have to increase our sales percentage from 27% profit to 30%. And then I mentioned to him, well, you really don't want to sign this contract with me. And then he said, why not? That's my goal. I have to reach 30% margin in Brazil. I said, well, it's going to be the easiest project I have ever done. How so? Well, I will just calculate how much price increase I have to give in your price list. No, but then the volume. I say, yes. So we are talking
Right.
dollars margins. We are not talking percentage. No, we are talking percentage. And they have these targets that I really fully don't agree. At the end of the project, how funny it was. We suggested to develop a new product line for them to compete with the regional Brazilian companies, because it was an international company, Spanish company doing business here. They have a strong brand, and they said, let's fight another market, for the C and D markets here, because they were really focused on A and B type of consumers. And then suddenly they used to have 2 plants in Brazil. Now they have 6. They're the market leaders, but their percentages remain the same or even lower a little bit. But their contribution margin after 6 months of the project, they were already building 1 or 2 new plants. And the CFO came to me and said, Fred, we never saw so much money coming into this company. I said, wow, great, right? That's fantastic. That's what we wanted. And at the beginning, the focus would be completely different. It was to really increase percentages, which does not mean that's basic. But I mean, what does it matter if I have 90% of a business and my business is so small, right? It doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
Sometimes.
So in our situation, and I'll say this for pricing managers or directors of pricings in big companies, we may want to manage margin dollars, but we often just have to do what the executive team says, right? So if the executive team says we want revenue growth and margin percentage, that's what we manage to.
Yes, and I can understand that situation as well, especially here in Brazil, where usually we are working with subsidiaries. So we do not have the power to really change the goals or the strategy. We have just to comply with whatever it comes. And sometimes that's what they're asking us to do. Yep. So I can understand. I may not agree, but sometimes that's your job, right?
Well, it could
I remember, I think General Python, or another general in the US, one of the awards, I remember some phrase saying, oh, but we didn't know it was Saddam Hussein, right? You didn't kill Saddam Hussein, but that was never the mission. The mission was something else.
Right.
And I agree with that statement as well. You have to do the mission. What's the mission you have to do?
Yep.
Of course, you can try to show that the mission should be different from what you're being asked to do. But if you can't move that, I'm fine. I play by the rules.
Yeah.
I paid to deliver whatever project they asked me to deliver.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't want to pick on CEOs or CFOs. The reason that companies often say we care about revenue growth and margin percentage is because that's what they believe their stock price moves on, right? So they're worried about their market capitalization, and so that's what they want to manage. They tell us to manage that. That's what we manage.
Exactly, and there's a lot of value. I think Amazon just proved that, right? For 20 years. They never turned into profit for 20 years, and it's one of the most valuable companies in the world, just based on growth. So, and Robert Phillips is the pricing and revenue optimization there, and I had classes with him back in the 2000s. So this guy is a genius, and he's sitting there for Amazon, so they know what they're doing probably.
Yep. Absolutely. Let's talk more about price implementation, though. Uh, do you ever get involved in sales compensation plans? How do we convince
And
salespeople to hold price or negotiate price? Or
sometimes that's not our major focus. Here in Brazil, we have a lot of laws for employment payments and things like that. So it's something that is really delicate to work with. We have to involve HR personnel to change commissions or things like that. But sometimes they ask us to think about how they compensate people. So actually, at this moment, I'm working with a large retailer in Brazil where we are changing the way we are going to compensate them. So every percentage point of discount they save, it's going to translate to them to some additional pay. And why was that? Because here in Brazil, it's common for companies to work with a very large discount rate. And that's because of in the past, we had a lot of inflation and we have prices that were frozen by the government. So companies are afraid that this could come back because we always have some inflation. Right now, we are running at 10 or 11 a year. So what companies do to play safe? They usually have a very high price list and they discount a lot. And why is that? Because if the government comes and say you have to freeze your prices again, I can just keep cutting discounts and raise my price. So it's like a strategy that remains. But what's the negative side of this? Once I'm used to give 50% discount, I cannot sit down with my customer and say, by the way, I have more 0.5% discount to give you or 1% discount to give you. The guy is used to 50. He wants to talk about 55, 60. And that's a lot of money. So sometimes we advocate to companies to reduce what we call a price list sincerity or something like that. I don't know the word, but to be more sincere with your price list, and then you can reduce the level of discount. But I mean, to change that mindset for the sales force that are used to large discounts, it's tough. And we are in the process of changing that in one retailer company here in Brazil. So we are incentivizing them to say, hey, every discount that you can save, don't go back to the 50. You're going to keep a lower level of discount. So play with us. And it's working
well,
because they make some money.
the good news is every percent saved is pure profit.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we can share that with the salesperson. That's okay.
Yeah, part of it. Yeah.
Hey, I didn't plan on asking this question, but I'm going to ask it. We in the US are just now starting to face inflation again. So we're up in the 5-6% range. So we and most of my peers don't deal with inflation much at all. Give us some advice on how do we handle pricing in inflation?
That's a good question. Actually, I just did a pricing course in the US. I'm not going to mention where nor the professor. And they showed us a case that for 10 years, a mattress company in Chicago was not raising their prices. So they could not calculate elasticity because there was no change in price. And then I challenged the professor. I said, well, that's not the case because if you're not changing your nominal price, your real price is becoming lower. Even if you have 1 or 2% inflation a year, that means 1 or 2% lower prices a year. Not nominal, but relate to other goods.
Right.
So, and by doing so, by thinking so, I have already a price variation where I can estimate your elasticity because you are becoming cheaper and cheaper. And probably that's one of the reasons you're selling more and more. We just have to understand how much of your price no variation, which for me it's a price loss every year, it's giving you a competitive edge in terms of lower prices regarding to other goods that is benefiting you in terms of volume of your mattresses. It was a good discussion. So for me, one of the things you have to keep on, you have to have a benchmark, an inflation benchmark, and you have to be tracking it. You have to be ahead of it. You cannot be below it. because otherwise you're losing. You're losing from inflation. Yeah, even in Brazil, here it's common to make those mistakes. People say, oh, last year I raised my price by 6% and I don't have elasticity because my volume grew by 4. But like I said, inflation is 10, 11. So if you raise your price by 6, in real terms, you're lowering your price by 5. And that's why probably you are getting more businesses. You're becoming cheaper than the market. Sometimes you don't have, so you have to choose a benchmark. Once we started to work with a magazine, the leading magazines here in Brazil, the publishers, and there's no other comparison. Inflation was kind of very different because they have their own inflation because of cost of paper and things like that. So we decided to benchmark against other goods that would compete with a magazine, a weekly magazine or a monthly magazine. Could be a movie ticket, could be an ice cream. And we selected a bunch of products that could compete in terms of where consumers were going to spend their money. And we are tracking those prices to compare where we were. Because since I'm the leader in that market, how can I know if I'm becoming cheaper or not? So we selected a basket of goods, and if they're raising their price, we're going to raise as well. Just to give an example. So always take inflation into consideration. If I'm not coping with inflation, I'm staying behind.
Yep. So let me ask, let's pretend that I'm this mattress company and I've got inflation 1% to 2% a year. I haven't raised my prices. The real issue is, did my competitors raise their prices? So if my competitors kept up with inflation, then absolutely, I'm essentially lowering my price relative to my competition. If my competitors never change their prices, then it's a question of, are people replacing mattresses more because they seem to be less expensive relative to the overall budget that I might have?
Yeah, then I cannot answer exactly. We have to really evaluate the situation, and if you can find information about your competitors. Actually, that's a good question. You have to understand, sometimes it's the inflation of your market, right? What my competitors are doing, and if I have this cross elasticity. That's very easy to do when you have syndicated information, like consumer goods. Where you can buy Nielsen or other sources, then you can really understand with price fluctuations where the market share went, and you can make very good models in terms of price cross elasticity. Who is your main offender? How much vulnerability you have against your main offender, or how much punch you have against him or her. Anyways, but again, if I don't have any information from my competitors at all, I would assume that I should be doing my moves. And if I go with my inflation rate, okay, I'm losing 2% a year. If I'm this mattress company, like you said, and I'm just keeping my price, first of all, I wouldn't. I would try to put 1%, 2%, 3% to be on top of inflation every year. And then I could measure the reaction of my customers. Am I losing volume or not? And if not, keep raising. Why should I stop? Sometimes companies are very afraid of changing prices. It's amazing.
I think that's so true. So true.
And it's unbelievable. They freak out. I mean, no, I cannot increase my prices. Oh, I have to be below inflation. Come on, guys. No, we should be bold. And the easiest thing to do is to reverse. Oh, I was too strong. I charged too much. Oh, okay, lower.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Frederico, we're going to have to start wrapping this up, but let me ask you one last question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Take price. Give price the importance it deserves. I have seen companies not paying attention too much to the area, and I have seen companies that really believe that pricing can be a game changer. I have lived enough, and then almost 200 projects I have done, that I could say that companies that really understand the value and pursue a pricing discipline, a pricing focus, they could benefit enormously in terms of results. Big results. I have seen,
And what's fabulous about those results is that it's almost always profit as much, if not more, than revenue.
sorry, I couldn't hear,
I
Mark.
said those results are almost always profit as much as, if not more, than revenue.
Oh, yeah. It could vary, right? I mean, pricing can go both ways. It can help your company to achieve growth, and profitable and sustainable growth, I would say.
Yeah.
It could be magic. With very, I'm a true believer on that. Probably is the easiest actions that you could take that's going to make the major changes in the business results you have.
Nice.
And why you overlook that,
Frederico, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Well, they can reach me at my company website, www.quantiz.com.br, because we're based in Brazil. Feel free to give me a message and I will reply, or my team, very shortly. Thank you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you to our listeners for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? The reviews are very, very valuable to us. And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.